Welcome into this special edition of the Fast Lane. I am Trey Lyle here to preview some more college football action. I am joined by David Eckert of the Southern Miss, beat reporter for the Hattiesburg American. David, thanks so much for joining me. And how excited are you for some college football?
I'm excited to be on first of all, and yeah, it's gonna be fun. When you're on the beat, you run out of preseason storylines pretty quickly. So I'm excited to have some actual football to write about pretty soon.
Yeah, so second year for Will Hall, and he's coming off a somewhat disappointing 3-9 season, but it's been a struggle for this program. But there's a lot of positives coming into the season. You win your final two games. You're now in the Sun Belt Conference. How has this process been? For this second year coach in fall. Obviously with spring practice and then summer conditioning and fall practice and joining a new conference. What is the excitement around this program at? Coming off of the two wins last season, joining a new conference, and everything that comes with that.
Yeah, I think the excitement levels are probably as high as they can be for a team that went 3-9 last year. But I think
Like Nebraska levels?
Well, we won't talk about Scott Frost here. We don't need to do Scott Frost slander. But I think if you look at the way that Southern Miss went 3-9 last year, right? They were they just had injuries all over the place. Like almost literally their entire quarterback group was injured. They were playing running backs at quarterback for those final two games. They won. They were at a point where they only had 62 scholarships last year. They're up to 85 for this season. So for me, I think this is the first season where you can truly, in my opinion, take stock of what you have in Will Hall, because they're operating like a Division I football program, whereas they were not last year. So I'm excited to see what they have on Saturday. It'll be an interesting game for sure. But yeah, a lot of optimism, and I think rightfully so. Um, Nobody really knows what they have yet, but that's part of the fun, right?
Yeah, but the good news is they do have a star player with a pretty big name, Frank Gore Jr. They're obviously very talented running back who dad has played in the NFL or did play in the NFL basically for 40 years. And how big of an impact is he going to have on this offense? And obviously, he has a big name, but this guy is a pretty talented running back.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's funny this summer and this fall, I guess, when Frank Gore has entered scrimmages, you've been able to tell because the offense has gotten a lot better almost instantly. Um, he's gonna make an impact, no doubt about it. I think they have a very good running back room in general. They'll use something that they call the super back down here, which it's kind of like a half slot, half running back type of thing, and they'll run a lot of two back sets. So it's going to be more than just Frank Gore. You're going to see a lot of running backs on the field for Southern Miss, but Frank Gore no doubt leads the room, and he's going to be a guy that if they win this game will make an impact, no doubt.
Looking more at this offense, obviously quarterback competition, quarterback starter. Ty Keys comes in. What was his performance? Obviously, you mentioned the injuries. How was he last season, and what is the expectations from this coaching staff as Ty's stepping into the starting role, kind of at the start of the season?
Yeah, well, he got the chance to start 3 games last year and then was injured. So he's a redshirt freshman. I don't think anybody really knows outside of the coaching staff what the baseline is with him. He's very mobile. He's going to run the ball a lot. He's got a big arm. He's grown he's grown in the mental aspect of the game. But again, that's one of, and it's probably the big question mark for this team is how is Ty Keys going to play? And when you listen to Will Hall talk about him, it's very apparent that I think he believes that he needs to give Ty Keys a strong platform. Um, they need the offensive line to play well, which was not the case last year. They need to set him up schematically in a way that's going to help him, because I don't think at this point that Ty Keys is a guy that's going to go out there and win you games by himself when he's not getting the help. So I'm excited to see him. I'm excited to see the progress that he's made. But yeah, I think a pretty sizable question mark there.
They do return 10 starters on that offense. That's kind of a theme for this team. They do return a lot as a whole. You mentioned the lack of numbers. They also were, last season with the scholarships, they did attack aggressively the transfer portal, which we'll talk about more with the defense. But some names to watch for on this offense outside of, Frank Gore Jr. And, they're going to face a really stout, really good Liberty Flames defense.
Yeah. I think, well, the big one is Jason Brownlee, stud wide receiver. Just has the size, has the speed. He's very, very good. Outside of that, I think they feel really good about the secondary options they have in that room. They have a guy in Jacarius Caston, who is going to make some plays. They have Brandon Hayes, who I'm expecting to get the start. We haven't gotten the depth chart yet, who is a really good deep threat. So I think they have talented wide receivers. Again, can they get them the ball? That to me is the question. So those, I think, would be the guys that I'm watching out for.
Let's move to the defense. Obviously, Liberty names Charlie Brewer, the Baylor Utah transfer, who's had really big highs and some lows in college football, but does bring that veteran kind of presence to an offense full of great weapons. But this Southern Miss defense has a boatload of talent. Definitely will be the strength of this football team. From what I read, 11 starters back plus 6 P5 transfers. What is the expectations for this defense? How's the coaching staff feeling about their defense?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head that this is going to be a defense that's the strength of the team. The secondary, very talented players in the secondary, very experienced players in the secondary. It's a defense that can adjust or based on the type of offense that it's facing. It's not going to be a defense that says, here's our identity, we're going to stick to it. They are going to adjust based on what they're coming up against every week, which I think makes them sort of unique. But yeah, it's going to be a solid unit. The question for me is, look, last season the numbers weren't amazing. The points per game numbers, I think they were probably actually in the bottom half of college football, if memory serves. But they were put in awful positions by their offense all season. The offense was so pitiful that the defense just they did what they could, but that often wasn't good enough. So to me, what I'm looking for is, assuming the offense is more competent and doesn't lose 5 or 6 of its quarterbacks to injury, can this defense now become a dominating defense rather than one that was good in the face of difficult circumstances? So they have the talent to do it. I'll be interested to see if they can make that jump.
Big picture, and we kind of touched on this is the first season in the Sun Belt, and ironically, Liberty is sort of taking Southern Miss's place, different locations in Conference USA eventually. How has kind of the team, is the team just not worrying about the adjustment? They're like, we're just going to play our schedule, but how kind of is it? You could look at both sides, kind of using this as a barometer because, Liberty is very familiar with a lot of teams in the Sun Belt. I think of their matchups with Coastal in recent years. They played Louisiana Lafayette last year. Do you think both teams could use this as a barometer of, like, for Southern Miss, like, hey, this is could be a really good Sun Belt team if they were in the Sun Belt, or if you're, Liberty, you're like, oh, this is what we're going to face consistently in Conference USA.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point for sure. I think there's probably an element of that to it. Just from the Southern Miss perspective, because that's, I think, what I can best speak to. They are extremely excited about the Sun Belt move, like extremely. You will not find anyone in town who has a bad thing to say about the move. think the relationship with Conference USA had kind of gone stale for a lot of people. You look at the geographic footprint of the Sun Belt, it just makes sense for Southern Miss, right? You've got South Alabama, you've got the 2 Louisiana schools. You're not making 2 trips to West Texas for divisional play, which is, over 1,000 miles. So I think it makes sense for them. I think a lot of people here are really excited to maybe have some regional rivalries back. And I think, when you look at the broader landscape of college football, especially at the top level, there's kind of been, a move away from geography as a governor, right? You look at USC and UCLA, they're joining the Big Ten, right? I think people like that that's not what's happening here, that, proximity still matters. So, yeah, Southern Miss, I think, is really excited for that move.
Give me just before we you don't have to give a pick, but before we break down, give a final quote unquote pick for the game. What are a couple keys you want to see from Southern Miss? Reading a couple of your articles, doing my research. You talked about turnovers being a big issue last season when they were able to cut the turnovers down. That's when they won their 2 games, or their 2 games late, I should say. But how big of that is going to be, an issue for them? And what are some couple other keys you want to see from this team in their first game?
Well, yeah, I think turnovers to me is huge because, look, I think Liberty, as much as we don't know about these 2 teams, this being the first game of the season, I think it's probably safe to say that Liberty is probably the more talented group. So when that's the case, if you're Southern Miss, like, you have to win the turnover battle. That's how you compensate for that. So, and that's not going to be easy because, as you said, Charlie Brewer, I mean, this is a guy that's immensely experienced, not only at, at the Power 5 level, right? So, you have a guy who's seen it, and he's going up against a guy in Ty Keys who hasn't, let's be honest. So they need Ty Keys to really take care of the football. They need him to play more experienced than his age, and they need to force Brewer into some mistakes. But outside of that, I mean, you look at special teams, right? For Southern Miss, I think that's an area where they feel like they can, possibly swing this game. And then chunk plays, who is going to hit the deep ball? Can Southern Miss, break off a few 40-yard passes for touchdowns? That to me is kind of what I'm looking at. Defensively, again, can they make that big game-changing play? Because I think they're going to have to. I don't think this is a game that Southern Miss can win, 20-17, where nobody turns the ball over and it's just clean football.
Ty Keys, the next Brett Favre. That's my biggest takeaway from all of this. All right. Go into the game. The boys out west in Vegas have Liberty as a 3.5-point favorite, over under 49.5. David, what do you think is going to be your pick for this one? Do you have a side that you're leaning? I know reading a couple of your stuff, you've given out some the path for a bowl game for Southern Miss. What do you think is the likely outcome in this one?
Yeah, I think Liberty will win the game. That's, again, at this point in the year, that is nothing more than an educated guess. But I think looking at where the two teams are as far as like their program development goes, Liberty is just ahead. And we know that Liberty is losing a lot. I think I read they only returned 7 starters, but they're at a position in their program and where they can probably compensate for that, and they have an experienced quarterback. So I do think that this is a game that Southern Miss can win, and if some things break their way, and I think the Vegas line kind of tells you that as well. Like 3.5 isn't a huge margin, but yeah, I'm going to roll with Liberty.
Well, David, thanks so much for joining me this week. And if our listeners want to get some Liberty fans, want to get a preview of the game and read more of your stuff, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is David Eckert 98, or you can find all of my stuff on the Hattiesburg American website. which is just HattiesburgAmerican.com. Really appreciate you having me on. I enjoyed it.
Thanks so much, man. Well, thank you so much for listening to this special edition of the Fast Lane. As always, we'll preview every game for Tech, UVA, and Liberty all season. This is a special edition of the Fast Lane. As always, you can connect with me at Trey Lyle VT, at Fastlane, Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Thank you so much for listening to this special edition of the Fast Lane.